mainstream narrative that trans people do self-explain by saying that we were born in the wrong body, which is to me metaphysically impossible. It's a bad model of treatment in my view. It's like it's not opening doors, it's closing doors. People like in the public discourse are not attentive to the needs of trans people or detrans people. They don't really care. Just listening to people who have different views on like why they chose to detransition, like did you actually feel like a change of identity, what are the reasons? And I think that is nuances that are very interesting for people who are considering to transition to listen to and know about.
Greetings and salutations, my friend. I have a book and I am not afraid to use it. This book has been written in Norwegian and it translates to Born in the Right Body, a trans man's story. It offers a criticism of the Norwegian healthcare system that has been forcefully sterilizing transgender individuals for years. For this reason, I invited the author of this book, Luca Dalen Espseth, for a conversation on my channel, which he agreed to. I will be reading parts of this book translated to English by me as a sort of interlude throughout the conversation. So give a warm welcome to my next guest, Luca. Roll the red carpet. Hi Luca, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'm happy that you're here because I think there's really important conversations to have. And you appear to me to someone who wants this conversation to happen. And I'm someone who's really all about trying to build a bridge between those different ideological branches. And you strike me as a very open person.
I try to be, at least.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you're trying to come across as such, so I think you accomplished something there.
That's good.
I have quite a lot of questions to you concerning this book, but before we start with those, would you like to hear my general thoughts on this book, or like a review of that? Okay, so first of all, it surprised me a bit because it was a bit different from what I was expecting.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting there to be so much focus on the national hospital that treats trans patients in Norway, Rikshospitalet. So that was a surprising thing for me because a huge portion of this book talks about that, right? But what I love the most about it is those short and very personal stories from your life that I found actually most appealing. But overall, very interesting. There were a few things I didn't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, I would assume so. But I was assuming that. But
but we're also going to talk about those later. But there are also things I did agree with, and I think we definitely have this overlap when it comes to the criticism of the treatment model we have here in this country, and I believe that is something we're definitely going to agree on. I hope so, at least.
Yeah, cool.
So my first question to you. So you claim to be a man, but this book is pink. What the fuck is wrong with that? Like, there's just a little bit of blue here, but
yeah, I should have had more blue to manifest more as a man. Yeah,
I think it definitely needs to appeal to stereotypical gender norms and all that stuff. Yeah,
should have done that better.
You messed up, really.
I'm sorry. I do it with like the post on the front page, though. I'm very like.
Well, yeah.
Macho thinking.
Audience.
This is me, and my thoughts about gender. Yeah.
Macho men and pink, I guess, perfectly together. No, but a first serious question. So, the title of your book is Born in the Right Body. Why that specific title?
Well, it's about a lot of things, actually. It's a general commentary on the very mainstream narrative that trans people do self-explain by saying that we were born in the wrong body, which is to me, it's just like metaphysically impossible, first of all, and it's also a very it's a narrative about gender that puts a lot of attention to the body and how it is, how it looks, and how it's screwed together. And I don't really like that part of gender that much. I think it's a lot more important to focus on how people feel your gender identity, and also about like societal norms and so on. And of course, if people have an urge to change aspects of their body, I think they should have fairly freely access to do so. But also, changing your body is not replacing it with somebody else's body. That's a huge difference to me. And also, there's a lot of the anti-trans, I don't know, movement these days that a lot of the time say this version of you can't be born in the wrong body, meaning you can't actually be trans, like your identity is not valid as a trans person. So this is kind of me beating them to the, I agree, you can't be born in the wrong body, but I highly disagree on the reasons why, but yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely agree with you on the metaphysical part of it, that it is impossible to be born in the wrong body. While I do acknowledge there's the phenomenality and physicality, I think that there's a certain connection between the ego and the flesh, and that the ego can't really exist without it. It's at least as a form of life, right? So it seems to me that some trans people don't really associate with this term "born in the wrong body." At all, but I also have met some who do. What do you think is the difference between the two? Why do some actually feel like so at home with this definition while others don't?
I think language is complicated when it comes to whether or not it appeals to us, and there's a lot of feelings and emotions we can't really explain. And there's also like trans people have different ideological standpoints and views, and have different like academic or non-academic angles or insights in the whole concept of gender. And I think that trans people, no matter how like educated you are, or no matter how like much gender theory or philosophy you have read, your feeling of having a gender is still like valid. So I think that I'm not saying that it is an unacademic way to talk about gender, but it's at least a very like easily accessible, self-explanatory in a lot of ways way to explain who you are, and it's a very like accessible narrative. And I don't necessarily think that a lot of trans people have thought through where the phrase comes from, what it implies in a more metaphysical or philosophical matter. It's like they just have this gender identity, and it's different from what the world expect, and they also, I would assume that a lot of people who self-explain in a way where they say that they have been born in the wrong body, I do also believe that a lot of those are quite dysphoric, and also feel that at least many aspects of their body actually feels wrong. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think people should be free to self-explain in whatever way they want. But of course, I do see that it makes it confusing to the outside world that not all trans people agree on why we're trans, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, I often hear people saying that trans ideology is contradictory.
Yeah.
And I hear it very often, like people on the right writing about it. But, my impression is that trans ideology isn't really like this singular ideology, but more like a tree with different branches. So I would say both me and you were somewhere on that tree, just not definitely not sitting on the same branch like two birds or something like that. But I think we exist in the same tree. Yeah. In a way. I also think that people definitely should have rights to identify with that term "born in the wrong body." If they, so I'm not someone who would tell you like, no, you can't.
No, I'm not gonna
you can't, like, no, I'm definitely not about policing the language either. But historically, I think that the term "born in the wrong body" was a sort of misleading, but also very medical term to use it as a justification why trans people should be allowed to transition.
Yeah. And I guess it made sense in the time when it was first started being used by physicians who were trying to help trans people in a world where no one knew that we existed. But it's also a term that's being used to describe gay cis people. One also like explained how males could be attracted to other males by saying that they had somehow like a female soul or a female whatever.
Yep.
And of course that could make sense in some logic, but it also doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense in a poetic way.
Yeah.
But I don't think it makes sense in a metaphysical sense.
No, definitely not. I agree.
You know, you've mentioned, and I think it's okay if we start light topics before we do something more heavy. So I think there are some really interesting and fun parts in your book when you talk about your experience of two people at a cafe, and one of them referring to you as he, the other referring to as she, or that part when you were speaking at some venue and there was this person listening to you and they didn't actually hear what you were talking about, but they were just staring at you thinking, is it a man? Is it a woman? So those experiences, do you just find them annoying, or are you able to find the fun part in it? Like, this is a fun memory.
There's a lot of times in my life where gender has been kind of confusing to the point where it's fun, like some kind of comedy or tragedy where it's where I also have had a lot of fun by trolling people in my gender expression. Of course, I don't have that possibility anymore, or I could, but then I would like wear a dress or do something like that. But like earlier in my life, when I had like a more androgyne kind of appearance, it was kind of fun sometimes. But of course, there's also a point where it's stressful that people misread you or have are more concerned with finding out what gender you truly really are than listening to the things you say. And also, of course, breaking gender norms also comes with harassment and discrimination. And I think that's for every non-conforming child, that's a fairly common experience.
Yeah, I mean, I could relate to a lot of it because I've been in their situation myself where I've experienced that I haven't been seen for who I am, but rather people trying to decipher whether I'm a man or a woman. And you know, even on my videos I'm making, sometimes I will get comment like people asking, were you originally born as a boy or a girl? Like, what kind of a detransitioner are you? Right.
How does that make you feel?
How does that make? Good question. I laugh at it. I find something interesting about it, but at the same time, I also think it is an interesting insight into human psyche that we can't really, we don't really have those two absolute categories we put people in. And you know, some people were just not fit into someone's picture of what a man is or what a woman is, and that you can be both at the same time to different people. And I know you've also described an experience like that. And I could also, you know, relate to that a lot because I remember in the first half year of me living as a trans woman, I was walking to school and there was those two kids who were like asking themselves whether it's a boy or a girl.
What are you?
And they had this really aggressive debate about it. I thought they were going to kill each other at the playground.
People do kill each other over the question of what kind of gender people have. So, but
So I think there's a fun part to it. You also mentioned in this book that you're being asked about it very often, like what is your birth sex, or what does your genitals look like, and a lot of uncomfortable questions you get, and it's always the same questions over and over again. How does it feel to you, like if you're like getting sick of it? And how do you move on from that to sort of ignore that and just being you?
Well, I think there's there's actually quite a lot that's happened in the public discourse surrounding trans people and gender in particular, or in general. And I do feel that the question of how does your genitals look comes up less often now.
Okay.
It's not. I don't think that a news reporter would ask you that these days, or at least I hope not. But 10, 15, 20 years ago that would happen a lot. So the first thing that makes it easier now for me is that people have actually stopped asking trans, and I hope also that people have stopped asking detrans people how your
well, that's an interesting point, because my impression with the media is actually the opposite.
Okay.
I get a lot of those questions, or another very common question I got was, will I get a reconstruction surgery, or when would I get the surgery? So I got some people claiming that I can't really go back to being a man unless I go for a surgery to have a penis again.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Especially in the if it comes from the people who are like biological essentialists in a way, then in their view you should always have been male and should there's nothing you actually could have done to change that, and still they now. Yeah. The same people are kind of if you don't have a penis, and I'm like, oh my god, this is.
I know. I think there's this inconsistency that I just found a little funny from the beginning when I first came out publicly about it. It's just there's something funny about this inconsistency.
Yes, it's a very strange double standard that makes no sense.
Absolutely. Another thing I've encountered, not that often, but just a few times, is people telling me you haven't actually detransitioned unless you accept ideologically that transition isn't good for anybody, or that trans women are men, trans men are women. If you don't accept that, you haven't actually detransitioned.
Okay.
That's interesting to me, because it might seem that it's more of a psychological or ideological process almost than a physical one to some people.
But I think that's kind of the detrans narrative also that's been pushed a lot in the media, which is a very... It's kind of similar to the trans narrative, actually, when it comes to this idea that it should be that everyone who detransitions or everyone who transitions should have the same story of origin and
Yes,
and if you don't, you're strange or something. I'm of course we're different from each other.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely this expectation that as a trans person you're supposed to know that you're trans since you're 2 years old, or if you're playing with cars or wear dresses as a kid. I'm not really a big fan of those stereotypes, and I think there's very little room to individuality if you allow yourself to be locked in that box, right?
Definitely.
I have one question to you regarding what I said earlier about what the process of detransition is, right? It may be seen as an ideological thing to some. I was thinking a lot about what transition and detransition actually is. And I no longer think it's a physical process.
No.
It can be, but I think it's more of a state of mind, really, what you identify as. I'm not a man because I stopped taking estrogen, or because of how I dress. It's about my state of mind, really.
Yeah.
So. Do you think that the same could be said of transition?
Well, the trans community tend to separate it into social transition and medical transition, but those are both actions you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
think there's a difference between what you're doing and what you are.
Yeah, and and to me that is an interesting philosophical question, because
well, I really like to think of this whole trans debate in a philosophical than political way, really.
Yeah.
There's more for me it's a purely philosophical curiosity.
Yeah,
So-
and I agree, but I think there's at some point one needs to leave like the philosophical conversation and talk about what should society look like, what should be like the laws
Well,
and regulations and
That's
freedoms.
technically still a philosophical
Yeah, okay.
question because
Yeah.
politics is a branch of philosophy.
That is true. That is true. But yeah, at some point you need to at least like to think about, okay, so this is my ideology, or this is the way I think that the world works, and what kind of implication that should have for how you organize the world. And you might, yeah, and I also think that sometimes trans people are being like held to the standard that you need to have like this coherent sense of like gender philosophy in order to be allowed to be trans in the world. And in my view, you don't have to think of gender in a specific way in order to be allowed to do gender in a specific way in the world. But when it comes to the question of if whether or not transitioning or is something you do or is kind of more of a being, I tend to be like very postmodern in my own view of what of what gender is. So then, in my world, even like thinking I am a man or having the feeling I am a man is kind of an action. It's something I do. So but to me, the sum of all the things you do are also what you are, in a way. And
Yeah, that's very postmodern.
yes, yes, it is. But that's like, it doesn't really apply to anything in the real world in a way. It's like, I don't care. It doesn't really matter. But I think that before I socially transitioned, I definitely went through a time period of thinking a lot. Am I a man? I am a man. What am I? And having all those thoughts. And I did, like, my feelings and thoughts about gender changed a lot, kind of. So maybe that is some kind of a transition that is not socially or medically, and that exists in a kind of, I don't know. No, I don't know. What's your
Makes
thought?
sense.
Yeah.
Well, about my thoughts, because to me it sounds like you could almost reduce everything about doing something, because, well, yes, of course, thinking is also doing. Then you might reduce a person absolutely to what they do, and like that is what they are. I'm thinking of it more in terms that what we're doing is sort of a causative effect of what we are, and what are we is a very difficult question to answer, right?
Yes.
Because we sort of define ourselves either by identity created by belonging or by action. And I think to truly know what you are underneath that, you would sort of have to exist in a vacuum with no interactions with other people.
And it's also, that's not really interesting though, to know what a human would have been in a world where nothing exists. Because all humans exist in a world where everything does exist. And it's like, I already live in a world where other people are, and where I have needs and feelings and ways of living. And it doesn't really matter what it could have been, or it could be an interesting philosophical question, but it's not really relevant to the world what would have been my life or my thoughts or feeling around gender if I were in a vacuum somewhere. That might be the true essence of my gender, but it's still, it could be different from what it is in the world now, but I'm more interested in what it is in the world right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I don't remember exactly when I realized that I had to let the government sterilize me in order for me to change my legal sex. I'm not sure if I remember understanding at first what it actually meant. What I do remember is that a thought started forming within me. I wasn't going to be sterilized, and I wasn't going to live the rest of my life with female as my legal sex. It was around that time when Luca the transactivist was born. I thought, fuck this. I'm not going to fucking give up my bodily autonomy in order to change my legal sex. I will not change my body. I will change this system. So let's move the conversation towards the healthcare system in Norway. And before we talk about that, if you mind explaining to the audience here what exactly the treatment model then the standards of care here look
are in
like.
Norway. Okay,
So
yeah. So
it's going to be a bit of an educational bit. So if you're absolutely not interested in that part, skip to the different chapter. There's nothing wrong with you if you do that. Yeah. So.
it's gonna be boring. No, I'm actually
try and make it entertaining. Just
no, but I'm gonna keep it short. But
add a little joke there.
Yeah.
Something like that.
so. The healthcare system is kind of changing these days in Norway. So we have for a long time had a very centralized system with only one gender clinic, that is the state hospital in Oslo. But that is kind of changing. But I'm talking about my transition, and when I transitioned there was like one gender clinic at the state hospital in Oslo. And in order to get medical treatment you had to go to your primary physician, what is that, like your GP?
GP.
Yeah. You have to go to your GP and then be referred to a psychologist who were like referring you to this gender clinic, and then you had to go there and do this like real life experience thing where you have to live as a gender you feel that you are for a year, and throughout that year you're being like assessed by these doctors and people who work there. And at the state hospital they asked me like a lot of very stereotypical questions about gender, like what kind of toys I used to play with as a child, what kind of dreams I have about myself, if I'm like male or female in my dreams, and a lot of questions about how often I masturbated, what kind of sexual fantasies I had, and all these questions about sexuality and who I'm attracted to and so on. And in my opinion, I didn't get any question, and I think that's the experience of a lot of people who go through this process, that you don't get any kind of question that actually makes you reflect upon your gender, or that gives you relevant information about what the treatment is and what their effects are. They just like assessed, are you a plausible man to ask, like do you behave in a masculine way and so on, and do you have any like issues?
Mm-hmm.
and after a year
do you have
I have a lot of issues though. I think I have a normal amount of issues, I think we all have, but yeah. And then after a year of this that made no sense to me, and I didn't get any, even when I asked for like specific information about what do you actually know about the long-term effects of testosterone and so on, they were just like, I didn't get any information.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they gave me hormones, and I took the hormones. And and to me it was like, it was not really a problem to go through that assessment, because first of all I knew I had options, and I already knew and had all the information I needed, and I was self-confident about my gender identity, and I apparently also made the right decision for myself. And I was also aware and had this like I remember thinking this, like, these people obviously don't know what gender I am, and they obviously don't know what is the right choice for me. That was like very obvious to me. So I just thought like, this is my decision in a way, and these people are not helping me make that decision. But then they granted me access to hormones, and I do sincerely believe that they would not have done so if I were totally honest about what my thoughts and feeling about gender was, especially when it comes to, because I did identify as female when I was a kid, not like strongly, but I did, and I did that all throughout puberty. And I lied about that, and I don't think being so like in their eyes late onset, I don't think they would have given me any treatment. But
let's talk about it, because a lot of the time trans people get judged if they lie to healthcare providers in order to get access to hormones.
Yeah.
But let's talk about why that happens. Why do people feel forced to lie? And it's a well-constructed lie, because it may seem like every trans person presents the same story. And you tell it to yourself to the point where you're starting believing that. And I think that there are people who might have thought they were trans from early childhood and were wrong about it, and there are people who might come to this conclusion later on and be right about it.
Yeah.
So why just have this one strict category of what a trans person should look like?
I think it comes from, at least, it comes from a lot of transphobia and also a lot of phobia against people who like break gender norms. But in its essence, I think it's a sign of the fact that healthcare professionals don't know. They don't have any way of telling who's trans enough or not. They don't have any way of telling who's like gonna benefit from the treatment. So then they just have to listen to the people who come into their clinic and decides who will we give access to and who will we not give access to. And then it makes sense to them to give access to the people who are like most gender conforming, who are like very masculine men and feminine women, who are heterosexual and so on. And of course, when trans people know that these are the people who get access to care, we start lying, or we start like tweaking on our stories, emphasizing more, like I did, like emphasizing more my masculine interest than my feminine interest, and not giving them a full picture of what my interests were. And this is like, of course, like selvforsterkende. How do you say that in English?
Well, it translates directly to self-enhancing.
Yeah, but it's but it's like a circle of that, because there's like they get this, like people come in and they tell the same story, and it kind of makes them think that this is the true trans story, and then they give access to care to the people who tell that story, and then it's like it goes around like that, and it's a bad model of treatment in my view. It's like it's not opening doors, it's closing doors. It's not discovering or exploring with your patient, and it's also it's a much more concerned about what your identity or like the true essence of you are, than what kind of care do you actually need and want, and do you understand the potential consequences of it, both like medically but also socially in the world. And I think that is a more important conversation to have.
To have a right to be a man, I had to present a story that would convince the lady in white, all the doctors at the Rikshospitalet, and the whole society around me. In my story, I have always been masculine. It makes it easier for others to believe that I am a man. At many points in my life, I have said, as a child, I preferred playing with cars rather than dolls. As if playing with cars as a child has anything to do with the concept of a man. If that was the case, then there will be no men around until 1886, when Carl Benz patented the world's first motor car. Since I genuinely have zero interest in cars, I had to use the internet to find this out. That's when I also found out that Bertha Benz, who was married to Carl Benz, was actually the brain behind the car and the car's success. If married women were allowed to apply for a patent in 1886, perhaps Bertha Benz would be the inventor of the car, and maybe liking cars would be considered a very feminine and woman-like thing to do.
Because I think that there's also people with the same identity also have different needs when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm talking to a lot of individuals as part of the book I'm writing, trying to get this view of different experiences. It's very clear to me that people have different needs. And, I imagine there will be some people watching this who might be thinking that we need more gatekeeping of the sort, and that by doing that we might be preventing potential cases where someone transitions for wrong reasons, and that it might reduce the cases of detransition. But at the same time, I also think that this strict gatekeeping also creates more detransitions, namely because you can't really be honest about your intentions.
Yes.
And so if there might be a reason, maybe maybe it's not the best choice for you, it doesn't create a conversation between the healthcare provider and the patient to establish that. What are your thoughts on that?
No, definitely, 100%. I think that if people are actually, and that is kind of my argument in a way, that people in the public discourse are not attentive to the needs of trans people or detrans people. They don't really care. They just, that's my like, I don't think they are empathic to our experiences, and I don't think that they are interested in making a healthcare system that is good for both these groups, because I think that the same healthcare system would be good for both groups. And if you are really concerned about people detransitioning or having a feeling of regret or being dissatisfied with going to treatment, the best way of preventing that is giving people easy access to care, not like gatekeeping the access, like you talked about, and I have talked about, like not getting access to a healthcare provider that knew anything about gender at all. I think that these gender clinics should be like around the country. They should be very easily accessible. You can just go there, refer yourself to them and get access. And I think it's very important that this is doesn't feel like a test where you have to prove yourself to be proper male or proper female. It should be a place to explore and talk about your gender with a person who validates you and believes you, but also gives you information and a nuanced discussion and conversation about gender. And I think that the system we have created is very dangerous, because this gatekeeping makes a lot of people who should have had access to care not have it. And I also think that it overtreats a lot of people, because basically because we lie or we don't talk about the important stuff. And then also when they give you access, they do have this very clear expectation that you should go through all the treatment that they have that's available. And that's a very, instead of assessing like who are you and what are your personal individual needs.
There's quite a lot of questions I have in my head, but let's start with the sort of model you're proposing. What we are a lot of time referring to as the affirmative model, which Norway also seems to be moving towards, at least a little bit. Well, I can definitely agree on the part that it shouldn't feel like a test. I think we need genuine conversations and professionals who understand it and who have studied it from every angle. But how do you think it should look like ideally? Because there's a part in this book where you wrote that if you're allowed to get access to trans medicine, most people will still want to talk to them rather than just walk in and be like, give me hormones.
Yes.
But I'm thinking, aren't you putting a little too much faith in individuals there that they will do that? That there won't be those who will do exactly that? Just walk in and say, I want testosterone or I want estrogen?
Yeah. Well, then there comes the question of should you deny people that access? I don't have the answer, actually. Like, I don't have the definitely answer to what is the best way of organizing this kind of healthcare. So I'm totally open to if research and talking to trans and detrans people makes us make a system that is kind of kept in a way that says like you need to talk to people like twice before you can get access to hormones, or you have to be open to do this and that. Like the gatekeeping, the part of the gatekeeping today that I don't like is that they have this thing where they can say, I'm gonna tell you yes or no, and that is your go or your no go. I don't like, it's not doing an assessment that's the problem. It's the way it's like the content of the assessment that I think is pointless at this point. And it's also the fact that healthcare professionals can say like, no, you can't, and then you don't have, at least in Norway, since we only have one gender clinic, you don't get like a chance to get a second opinion and so on. But I do think that, of course, I think that most people would like to talk about their gender identity and their transitioning and medical interventions and want information about it and also want to like talk about it. But of course, if a person comes in, like the example you drew, like if someone comes in and just like, I just want hormones, give them to me, blah, 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 I probably would say no. You actually have to at least explain me why you want these hormones, what your thoughts about gender is, and why you don't want to be assessed in any way. Like, and also be like, I need to know that you are that you are scientifically competent. What's that? Like that.
Able to consent.
Yeah, that you are able to consent, and that you actually have the information you need and an understanding of that information. I think that's like that's an amount of gatekeeping I could definitely say that you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the end, it seems like we agree that not all gatekeeping is bad, but that some forms of gatekeeping are bad.
And of course, I mean, the Norwegian healthcare system, you gatekeep everything because like medical access to medical care is it's easily accessible, but it's also paid by the state. So of course there should be some kind of rules in what the state should pay for. I just can't, like, I can't just go into hospital and say like, I need an X-ray of my arm and get it paid by the state. Of course there should be some reasons for me to, and a healthcare professional saying you should get an X-ray of your arm. And of course I could easily get one if I said my arm is hurting a lot. I would probably get access to that X-ray. But
I mean, I can hardly imagine why someone would lie about their arm hurting to get an X-ray.
Well, I think that people lie about a lot of stuff.
Sure. I mean, you could have an X-ray fetish and you get off on taking an X-ray photo.
Just want to see how my bones look.
Yeah. X-ray porn. Yeah. That should become a category.
I think I'm assuming it already is. It's not. What's it called? If you can think it, there's porn of it. It's a thing. It's whatever. But yeah.
Probably. The way we gatekeep the treatment today creates a system with an enormously heightened risk of unfortunate outcomes. Namely, that people with a genuine need for treatment don't receive it, and that people who shouldn't undergo the treatment end up undergoing it. The way the system works is also harmful to the health of those who receive the healthcare they need, because they, and myself included, don't get the help they need when they need it. What we do get is a one-size-fits-all solution, which works for very few. But this type of gatekeeping we have in Norway, which is really based on those stereotypes, and I hear a lot of this talk about it. How can you know if you're trans? And then arguments for that can be something like, well, based on how I like to dress and what I played with as a kid. And I don't know if you aware, but if you type gender dysphoria in the Google search engine and look for images, one of the first images that shows up is those 6 signs you're trans.
Yeah, okay.
And they include things like what do you like to wear, what do you play with as a kid, and things like that. And there are some that I think are accurate, but also some that fall in this category of those stereotypical gender norms that Norwegian state hospital operates by.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense and doesn't make sense at the same time, because a lot of males are actually interested in masculine things. That is, it's a fairly common male experience. So that means that a lot of trans men are also interested in masculine things. So I do understand how people can make that thought error of assuming that this is a trait that this group had, and that it is a trait that we can use to establish who is really trans and who is not. But of course, then you could make it all wrong, because there is of course a lot of males who are feminine and a lot of women who are masculine. So but I think that is why you need to find some kind of different measure of who is trans enough or not. And I think for grown people that should be not strictly gate-kept as in somebody else telling you who you really are and what you really need. But I think that a healthcare professional should also be able not to say like, no, you should never get access to this, but they should be able to say like, I'm gonna postpone this decision a little bit because I'm not feeling like confident enough that you have understood and are like making a right and good decision for yourself. And I'm not saying I will never let you transition medically, but I'm saying like, can we schedule talking for 2 times more in 3 months or something? And of course, if that person don't want to do that, they could, in a perfect system, go to another gender clinic. And of course, you're always going to find someone who's just going to give you hormones and not ask you any questions. And people can make that decision for themselves. And it's going to go wrong sometimes. And I don't think I don't think there is a way of preventing that without. I don't think like in the end you can prevent someone from detransitioning or regretting having transitioned. There's gonna be some.
Yeah, well, I definitely think there will be cases. I don't think it is possible to make sure that 100% of people will be satisfied with their results or anything like that. I don't think it lies within the possibility. But it's interesting to me when some people say that we didn't have transitioners back when this strict gatekeeping existed, and I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I think the reason why we might be seeing more detransitioners talking openly is because there is more room for that. And I think that and it's sort of like the very similar effect to what happened with trans people, and why, some people think that there are more trans people these days. I think that seeing that on social media, people talking openly about it, makes more people open up and feel comfortable to talk about it when we create room for that. And I think that is sort of what is happening with detransitioners right now. What we have seen, this skyrocketing of this amount of trans people we have seen in like 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
I think there's a connection there.
Definitely. There's, and I think that, and in my opinion, it's a good thing that people see that you can detransition. It's a good thing for people who needs to detransition, but it's also a very good thing for people who are considering transitioning. To know that this is an option, and I can do it now, I can do it later, you're not, if you make this choice of transitioning medically or socially, it's not a once in a lifetime decision that you have to stick by. Absolutely. And also just listening to people who have different views on why they chose to detransition. Did you actually feel like a change of identity? What are the reasons? And I think that is nuances that are very interesting for people who are considering to transition, to listen to and know about. It would have been nice in a way if it were kind of mandatory for people who are considering transitioning to actually meet a lot of people who do gender in different ways. And there's no way of making that mandatory, but I think that having a friend group with gender diverse people, trans people, and just talking to different people who have chosen differently when it comes, and living differently when it comes to gender, I think that's a very good way of finding out who you actually can and want to be in this world. Because some people live their life inside of a part of society where the gender norms are very rigid, and you don't really see these different ways of being gender in the world. And I think that's very important to see that there are different ways of being that you can choose, and that includes seeing people who have detransitioned.
Yeah, throughout the last 1.5 year, I have had some people who are considering transitioning contacting me, actually, and what I'm usually doing is not something like telling people, oh, you shouldn't transition or you should transition, more like an actual conversation to help them find out what is the best pathway for them. And I think it can help some people who are considering that to talk with the transitioners and see whether there is an overlap in the experience or the leading factors there. But generally, I think, there's definitely some interesting insight into research regarding the transitions, because, and I think it's sort of sad that it has become so heavily politicized, because I think there's something to learn from that to create a better model out of knowing those experiences. But it seems to me that the conversation isn't really going there. It's more about
should you give access or not?
Exactly.
I agree, but I think there's definitely things happening in the field now. When I was at the Født conference now, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and there was quite a lot of interesting research being done on detransition. And there's a big survey, fairly big. It's I think there was 300 detransitioners in that survey, which is a quite large sample of a fairly small group. And they were talking about, it's not been also published. Published. But it's gonna be. And one of the things they said, like they had also done a lot of like in-depth interviews, and they said like the general thing they got out of that is that detransition people, and you already know this of course, and a lot of your viewers already know that, but are not benefiting from this very polarized are you for or against medical care kind of discussion, and a lot of detrans people are not interested in being an argument in the discussion about whether or not trans people exist, and I think that is a very, of course we already know that, but I think it's a very valuable thing that some researchers are actually showing this, and also I think they're gonna contribute to us like society, but also healthcare providers having a more nuanced debate and discussion about transition and detransition.
Yeah, I think that's a move in the right direction. Actually, what I think is really needed and something that a lot of detransitioners could benefit from is if, at least therapists and psychologists were more educated as towards the struggles that are specific to detransitioners.
Yeah.
Because I think there's very little focus on that, and a lot of the time we're not being met properly by the system. When we want to talk about it, it may feel like there is no one to talk about, because and sometimes also get gaslighted, like,
yes.
but you should be happy with treatment. Like, I was reading here that people benefit from treatment, so there is just no way for you to experience what you're experiencing. I'm sort of I really like what NHS in the UK is doing right now with a specific service for detransitioners.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it's beneficial, and I also talked about it here on this channel, is because some detransitioners may be skeptical towards the same model that treated them before.
And especially if it's the same healthcare providers.
Absolutely. Like, you don't want to go there. Yeah. If you had this really bad experience in Norway with Rikshospitalet, then you obviously wouldn't really want to go back there, right? And I think this stops some people from getting treatment they should have, and in the end, it's not bad for. It's not good for your health, right?
Because then people DIY detransition too, and I think that you should be monitorized when you stop your hormones or change the hormone balance in your body and so on.
And I was completely on my own when I did that, right? So.
And people should not be that. That's a terrible experience. And so I totally agree. And I also have talked to people who want to like detransition, and also people who just want to like change their their hormone balance, who want to like go on lower dose of testosterone and so on, who has contacted the state hospital and who have been refused help. So they're also like they are talking a lot about how they have this fear of people detransitioning, but they don't actually have this compassion and healthcare. They're not providing healthcare for this group, and that makes me just like furious. I'm like, you're using these people as an argument against trans people in the public media, and you're not helping the actual people you're talking about. That makes me angry. And I'm like,
understandable.
You're failing both of these groups, and I think that that's probably like my argument. I think that both detransition and trans people benefit a lot from the same things, and we can probably also agree on a lot of things. And of course, there's might be things we don't agree upon, but I think that a good healthcare system for trans people is also a good healthcare system for detrans people. And then there should also be like additional services and education about detransition specifics. But of course, that's going to come when there's more detrans people, and that's going to come because
I think so. I think so. It'll be a slow but natural move.
Yeah.
And my final point is your chapter. You wrote a specific chapter regarding regret.
Yeah.
And this question, like, what if you would regret your transition, and you try to portray it as if, like, well, there's a lot of things you might regret in life, such as, what if you
married the wrong person,
or you regret moving to some place, or so on. And My impression reading that, and I think it might be our difference in our experience, that it didn't actually portray the experience of what a detransitioner who detransitions because they find out it was a wrong choice for them, not because of let's say health or financial issues or because of social stigma. I didn't think it portrayed it correctly. There was a sort of a simplification and generalization of that experience, but at the same time I can understand why you would come from that perspective, because I think the media portrays the whole detransition thing in a wrong way. It sort of comes across as if the regret itself is this really, really scary thing. And my own personal thoughts on that it's not a regret that is bad. It's okay to regret transition. My problem is when there are complications because of that choice, such as surgical complications. And the way I see it, it's not an issue that is specific to detransitioners, because both trans people and detransitioners can experience those same complications. And I think that's the problem that needs to be addressed. And I definitely think we need more progress, medical and technological progress, to also make the treatment more reversible.
Yeah.
I think that will definitely lower the seriousness and this whole danger thing about transition regret.
I agree, and I don't think it's strange that I'm not portraying the feeling of detransitioning and experience regret in a very nuanced and correct way, because I don't have that experience. So I'm also going to leave it up to you to write the book about it.
Working on that.
Good, and continue doing that. And of course, no. And I also think that maybe some of the difference, because when I try to imagine detransitioning, which is kind of what I have to do, like imagining me, that's a very simplistic way, of course, but like waking up one day and realizing I'm like, that I want to live as a woman for the rest of my life. I also never went to any kind of like invasive surgery, so to me I haven't had that like bodily experience, and I think that also affects, and definitely it affects the way I think about what transition is, but also how I imagine detransitioning, because there's like that would be different for me than it was for you, for instance, and for any other person out there, but there's also I also do highly hold the view that a lot of people need like genital surgery, but I also think it's the thing that we should gatekeep the most. Gatekeep a bit harder than access to things that are reversible in the way that hormones are. Hormones are, of course, not all the effects of hormones are reversible after a while, but you can kind of ease into it and feel, is this changes that I'm feeling, or do they feel right?
I think it's a good idea. I think really should be implemented for everyone to start with small doses for at least a couple of months and see how it feels before they continue. I think there's a lot of focus on like gatekeeping puberty blockers, but at the same time that's also the most reversible ones, right?
Yes.
So I think we really should focus more on surgeries in these conversations rather than puberty blockers.
Yeah.
But I think that the focus on puberty blockers is mostly because that's the one that affects kids the most. And I think I don't think it's a bad thing to be concerned about kids' health. Really, I don't think it comes from a bad perspective, and and I'm at this position right now where I'm thinking, I don't think people on either side are like bad or have evil intentions there. I think, some people will say, okay, those who are pushing for access to puberty blockers, they want to harm kids, right? And then you also have this other side saying that those who don't want to give access to puberty blockers for kids are also harming kids. I think there's a good intention on both sides. It's just that intention is so conflicting with each other.
Yeah.
Sort of like.
I agree that there's good intentions inside of a certain aspect of that discussion, but I also think that it is people on the limited access to care who's not doing that out of a proper concern for children, who is doing that out of an anti-trans.
Well, yeah,
they just don't like trans people,
yeah.
but they're not really part of the actual discussion that proper healthcare people are having about who should get access to care and what kind of care and at what age. And that is a totally legitimate debate to be having.
Yeah, I think it is important.
And the right
very
answer
important
is
debate. So.
probably somewhere in the middle, as it always or a lot
Well,
of times
I think so myself. I mean, personally, I think there are extreme cases where someone might benefit from that. And I'm thinking also of my own case. When, as a teenager, my experience with testosterone being in my body as a biological male is that I was very hypersexual. At least my body was, whereas my brain is like somewhere on the asexual spectrum. So it was very hard for me.
Yeah.
And I benefited from not having that amount of testosterone in my system.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that, yeah, there are those who will benefit from it. I don't think we should absolutely say that no one should have access to that. I think, you know, the good question is who should and who shouldn't have.
Yeah. And how do you follow up when you give it to people, and what kind of assessment should people get?
Absolutely. I also think that, you know, instead of thinking of it in terms of gatekeeping, I like to think of it in two variables, like about the patient's autonomy and the provider's responsibility, and how I think both are sort of essential.
Yeah, and you should try to come to some kind of joint decision making, where both of those needs and rights are catered to in a way. And I think that is possible in most cases.
I think it is possible, and I really hope we will get there. And with my book project, I was sort of trying to, well, we not get there, but I hope my perspectives will offer at least some help in that.
Yeah, and I think that's very valuable.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One final question I want to ask you, and it's the same question I asked Buck Angel once. If during the time when you were first transitioning, if there existed a pill that could make you feel absolutely happy being a woman, and you didn't have to transition, would you take that pill?
No, I wouldn't.
No. Even though you're more likely to experience discrimination as a trans person, and there's some hard stuff that comes with it. Like, let's be honest, it's not exactly sunshine and rainbows, right?
No, it's not, but there is rainbows though.
Okay. Okay.
No, but I actually I can't imagine not being the person I am with the experience I have, of course, but of course if I took that pill, I would probably feel happy about it. So it would be fine if someone forced me to take it, and I would be happy living as a woman for the rest of my life. Yes, I get it. But I do really value the experience, and I also value the people I've met and the perspectives I've gotten. And I do really think that I've gotten a lot of insight in how it is to belong to a minority group in society, and I think that's made me a better person. Like, it's made me more empathetic and empathic and nice as a human being, and more open to the diversity of the human experience.
That makes perfect sense. For me, I definitely was able to relate more to the female experience living as a trans woman, you know, because of even the horrible experiences such as sexual harassment, calling us on. But, you know, in the end, I think, I absolutely think it makes you a better person for that reason. And what you're saying actually reminds me of the conversation I had with Ray Alex Williams on this channel a couple of months ago regarding the existence of such hypothetical pill, whether that would eliminate or destroy a certain culture
Yeah.
that the trans community have created, and what you said about having those connections and few people you've met.
Well,
makes sense,
if
really.
people were forced to take it, they would probably ruin our. But I think also that trans people are valuable to society, as the trans people are, and everyone who's like breaking the gender norms. I think we make space for like the cis-normative blah blah people too, and I think that's like a valuable part of the human experience.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. But if a pill, maybe not if a pill like that existed, but do you think it could be ethically justifiable to create a pill like that in the first place?
That's a very complicated question. I actually don't think I want to answer that. I think it's very complicated. Just because I would end up with an answer I would probably disagree upon like 5 minutes.
I'm disagreeing with myself all the time myself.
So I'm not going to give you a definite question, but it's an interesting discussion. But also a good question is, would I have taken a pill that would make me into a cis guy now? Like to actually, and because that I just thought about it, and then I think that the answer might be no to that too. But I'm less sure of that one than the first one.
It makes sense. I mean, you would sort of get rid of your experience, your uniqueness.
Well, this would be, in this case, I would still have the experience. I would just like have the body of a cis man, and then I wouldn't be cis in the way that I was assigned male at birth, because I would still remember. I don't know. It was just a thought experience inside of my head, but. But yeah, I'm quite happy both with my trans experience, but also with my trans body, and the fact that it is like visibly trans to other people. And of course that's not been the case, but now it feels like a good thing. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you're in a good place.
Yeah.
In general. Yeah. My thoughts personally on that kind of hypothetical questions of this ethical nature is that, well, I think even if, let's say I'm in the situation where I'm to make that choice, right? Mm-hmm. If I choose to take that pill, or if I choose not to take that pill, should I have the moral right to prohibit others from taking it? Okay,
so in this scenario, the pill already exists.
Yes.
Yes, then you should not have the access to deny.
Or let's say if I am to create it because... that doesn't make sense.
So if the pill is out there, I can't prohibit people from getting access to it. But I could like make like you should think about this, or like gatekeeping it in the same way that you gatekeep access to translated healthcare. Maybe, I don't know. But
let me formulate the question a better way. If I have the means and possibility to make that kind of cure, but I don't want to make it because I myself wouldn't take it.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't I be morally prohibiting others from having access to it?
Yeah, now you're making it very complicated, and I'm not going to give a definitely answer to that question. I do not know, but that's like that is of course like a philosophically interesting discussion, but we don't have the means to do that right now, so that's that's where
it's purely speculative.
I'm gonna think about it. I'm not gonna give an answer here and now, but maybe I will.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it is the sort of question that is easy to answer in general. And like I said, I am having a debate with myself about it in my own head a lot of the time. So
I get it.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, it was fun.
Cool.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it's been great.